Welcome back to my channel. My name's Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind approaches that can be used to help those conditions and other mind-body conditions. In today's video, I wanted to talk about 3 ways that our mind tries to trick us when we're using a mind-body approach. It's helpful to reflect on this because a lot of using a mind-body approach involves responding in a way that is not intuitive or that is not our normal immediate reaction. And we have to really train ourselves to do that because often our instinctual reaction is to believe our mind, believe our thoughts, and to get sucked into emotions that we experience when symptoms increase or when we're feeling worse, like fear and doubt. So what I share in this video is based on my own experience. I'm not sharing medical or mental health advice, but I think it's helpful just to reflect on some of these areas and think about how good our minds are at tricking us in these situations. So the first one is that our mind will trick us to believe that symptoms are triggered by activity, by foods, and by other things in our environment that we have come to believe cause our symptoms. So often I'll hear people say things like, I did too much, that's why my symptoms have flared, or I ate something that wasn't okay to eat. And this is a natural way that our brain starts to use predictive processing when we get unwell. So once we get unwell, our brain is trying to figure out what is causing the symptoms. And if every time you go for a walk for a number of days, you get symptoms afterwards, you're naturally going to come to the conclusion that walks or activity cause symptoms. Also, if you are reacting to certain foods, you will naturally come to the conclusion symptoms are because of these specific foods. Even when we come across a mind-body approach and we're using a mind-body approach, it can be really hard to disconnect these associations that we've already made. And our brain really naturally goes to giving us reasons why the symptoms might be there, due to activity or a poor night's sleep or something similar. So one example for me recently was that I had a bad headache and I wasn't sure why it was there. My mind immediately went to the conclusion, this headache is here because I had a bad night's sleep the night before. And I believed that, even though I know about the mind-body approach. I know that there's many other nights in the year I don't sleep well and yet I don't get a headache. But my brain just quickly made that association and I thought, oh yeah, that's probably it. And it wasn't until I did a somatic tracking exercise and noticed a sense of grief in my body as well as the headache that I realized, oh, now I know this is actually because yesterday I experienced some grief because I recently lost a dog that I used to look after, and I held back crying in that moment. And I also had convinced myself that the grief was gone, that I felt better, that talking about this dog as cathartic. So I'd convinced myself that I was fine. On a conscious level, I didn't realize actually I was still grieving and that I was suppressing this grief. And how it manifested was through the headache. But even though I know about this approach and have used this approach to get fully better, my mind still tricked me into thinking it was the poor night's sleep. So another way that our minds can trick us is making us fear symptoms and thinking of the worst case scenario. And the reason that our minds do this is because it's trying to protect us from an awful situation where we get worse and worse and worse, and then fill in the blank about all of those worst case scenarios that could happen to us if we're bedbound, if we're not able to eat, if we were not able to walk, all of the awful things that would happen, our mind goes to, and it's trying to protect us because it's trying to say, hey, be careful. You don't want that to happen. We need to prevent this from happening. But the problem about our thinking going in that direction, and especially the problem with us believing those thoughts, is that then we do start to feel very fearful. And when we feel fearful, our nervous system goes into a state of fight or flight or shutdown, and our symptoms will increase because of that. So that's why learning to respond to symptoms with messages of safety and with feeling a sense of trust that we're okay is a really important area to work on. Another thing that I find is pretty common when our mind tricks us that symptoms increasing is a sign that we are not recovering or that we're not making progress. And often this can be related to a perfectionistic trait that we might have. So when symptoms increase, often it's because our body has learned to react like that for many weeks, for many months, for many years. And it takes time for our brain to unlearn that response. And there's lots of different things that we can do to help. But symptoms increasing is part of the process of recovering. It is something that most people will have to go through whilst they're using this approach. But our minds can trick us into telling us that when symptoms increase, it's a sign that we're not getting better, that things are not working well, and that this is evidence that we are not okay or that this isn't working. It's really important to notice that, acknowledge it, but not believe those thoughts, and keep reminding ourselves that it's normal for symptoms to increase as part of using this approach. And responding well to those symptoms increasing is an important part of helping our bodies start to feel safer and our nervous system to relax more. Let me know if you relate to any of those 3 ways that our mind can trick us, or mention any others that you notice when you're using this approach, because there are probably many other ways our minds can trick us. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. If you're interested in coaching or following me on Instagram or joining my Facebook group, there are links in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.